What is up, everybody? This is Week 12 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire Show on the Fantasy and Frames Network. We're here to help you dominate your waiver wire. Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you. This is Thanksgiving week. Keep in mind, there are 3 games Thanksgiving Day and another one on Black Friday. Why am I reminding you of this? You already know this. 8 teams will have played by the time you normally set your lineup. That's why I'm reminding you of that. Don't forget to follow Fantasy and Frames over there on Twitter, TikTok, and of course, right here on the YouTube channel. Follow Zach at Behind the Zach and myself at FantasyJ77 over there on Twitter. Zach, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I could start complaining, but we've only got a short hour or so program, and I believe my complaining would probably go over. We could do that instead of the waiver wire if you want to.
I mean, maybe another show.
Okay.
I think we could though. I could go on for about an hour about the Packers right now. So I feel
it's not looking good. It's not looking good for either one of our teams. But speaking of both of our teams, let's dive right into the quarterbacks here that we have for the waiver wire this week.
It's funny how I don't need to be impressed with what I see on the field in order to be impressed with what I see in fantasy production. And that's what leads me to the quarterback of my team, the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love, J-Lo, as I like to call him, number 10. He's not sexy. It's been ugly. It's been up and down. But there has been some promise. There has been some flashes. There's a lot of things to question right now on this offense, whether it's the health of the running backs, whether it's the play calling and the decision-making by the coaching staff, whether it's the consistency and the health of the receivers with Watson, Dobbs, and Reed. Also, Musgrave's now hurt. But even J-Lo himself, sometimes he has these super awesome, flashy plays, these no-look passes. Other times he can't read a safety that's clearly just right there for an easy pick. So it's up and down and all around. But with that in mind, he is still QB12 on the year, according to Sleeper in redraft format. And if you look at his production on the year, he only has one single-digit fantasy week. Otherwise, 15.8 points or higher. And almost every week is at least 20 points. Actually, 7 weeks, 20 plus. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is the guy that, again, is only 46% rostered. And that's where, hey, it's not about how pretty it is to watch. Is it producing for me? And it is. I love it. I mean, I have Jordan Love in a lot of leagues. He's been producing for me. And right now, I think something important to mention, as I see in the chat mentions of Jake Browning, guys like Jordan Love, I'm a lot higher on as more and more quarterbacks that I consider top tier QBs drop. Because, while Jordan Love isn't necessarily this elite QB, he's definitely higher regarded than a lot of these backups that are now getting opportunity. And that's where Jordan Love is going to be bumped up in regards to where he is in the QB ranks.
We'll get to Jake Browning here in just a quick second. I did just want to throw this at you because I also do believe Jordan Love should be somebody that you should be looking at. He's coming off his first 300-yard plus passing game in his career. That's nice to see that he's finally eclipsed that threshold, that it is possible that he can throw that much or that far. Look, he's going to have a short week playing on Thanksgiving Day. With no Aaron Jones, should that, and maybe he should be forced to pass a little bit more. Maybe we'll see back-to-back 300-yard games. Detroit's defensive secondary is not the greatest in the world. So there should be some opportunities for him to go down the field, especially with the young wide receivers that he does have on that team. But the schedule gets a little bit tougher after week 13. After week 12 here. They get the Chiefs in week 13. But they do get to play the Giants in week 14.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a nice juicy matchup for him.
I like it in regards to an immediate production. I mean, I look at Detroit in that matchup, and we saw what the Bears did against Detroit last week. So why can't it be the same thing again this week? Obviously, it's tough to really use the Chargers as any sort of a reference because, well, the Chargers are really good at giving up points to a lot of QBs, unfortunately. But I still think I like what I'm seeing with J-Lo. I think it's a good value. Like I said, 46% rostered. Um, he's a guy that I even feel confident starting. If I don't have the elite of the elite, he's a guy that I'm comfortable putting in my lineup each and every week. With that in mind, there's another guy that's available though on the waivers for one of our favorite teams.
Well, before we get into that guy, let's talk about Jake Browning right quick, since Tim has brought it up in the chat. Due to the wrist injury, for Burrow,
So,
Browning was able to come in and not look horrible, okay. 14 pass attempts, completed 8 of them for 61 yards and a TD. Prior to this game, he had one attempt in his NFL career, and that was way back in week 1. What is your opinion of Jake Browning, especially in a super flex league, assuming, because that, if you're in a super flex league, that should be the only reason you're looking at Browning. But in a super flex league, is he a viable candidate for that super flex position?
I think the expectations have to be really low. I have him above Tim Doyle or Boyle in regards to how I value these backups coming in this week, but I still don't really have him much higher by any regards. I mean, I would say 10 to 15 points for a projection, but I wouldn't be confident in any more than that, and there's definitely a risk of it being low single digits as well. Because some of these backups, it can get really ugly really quick, depending on the week. And that's where I would rather wait and find out the hard way. I think in Superflex, you need to roster them, but it's just a matter of I would probably rather lean on a third running back or a fourth wide receiver to put at my Superflex slot this week than throw Jake Browning immediately in. Would you agree with that?
Especially because he's going up against a Pittsburgh front.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think, like you said, Browning should be ahead of Boyle, just strictly due to weapons.
And I think he's worth rostering, especially in that Superflex format. I want as many cracks at that starting QB slot as I can get. So he's definitely worth rostering. It's just a matter of, do I throw him immediately into my starting lineup or not? I would rather wait a week, find out, let me see, because it didn't necessarily look that great from what I was seeing. And hey, I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic. You know what I mean? We'll wait and see.
Well, let's move over to my quarterback for my Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who is available in 49% of ESPN leagues, 53% of Yahoo, and 51% of sleeper leagues as we stand right now. One of the safest floors throughout the whole season. He hasn't been turning the ball over, but this past week, the last 2 weeks, he does have 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, one of the fumbles being lost. But here is his schedule coming up is the Colts, Panthers, and Falcons. Really nice matchups for the quarterback position. Of course, he's got Evans, he's got Godwin, he's got Palmer, he's got an emerging tight end in K-Dot, which we will again talk about later on. I think he is a solid option for a superflex position going into these playoffs, especially with some of these big names like a Burrow, of course, Aaron Rodgers, these big name quarterbacks that have already gone down throughout the year. But I mean, like I said, they face the Colts in week 12. I think this is a prime opportunity to add him to your league. I mean, he's definitely a streaming option. Wouldn't you say, Zach?
I think he's worth more than a streaming option at this point. This time of the year, this type of schedule, this is the time to buy. He's super consistent, so I at least want him in my backup slot. I don't want to be sending him back at this point. I've seen enough weeks of it in a row where, for me, I'm going to just invest for the rest of the year, keep him on my roster as the backup, and start him potentially depending on the week and depending on who else I have. But I think it's too risky of a play to put him back into waivers at this point. He's definitely earned a roster spot, and I definitely want to snag him if he's still there.
Yeah, I mean, I've had him on a couple of my leagues or on a couple of my teams, and have over the last 2 weeks or so, somebody has lost a Joe Burrow, has lost a quarterback, and immediately he's like, "Hey, is Baker Mayfield available? I know you're a Bucks fan, but is he available?" I'm like, "Yeah, everybody's available for the right price." With that being said, I would probably be somewhere in that. If he's available in your league, go spend $20, $25 fab dollars on him. Now, I know I've been the one to tell you throughout the year, hold on to your fab. You're going to need it at the end. Well, now we're getting to the end, and this is the end, right? This is the end game. But now's the time to be a little bit more aggressive. Some of these players, we would be somewhere in that, 10%, 12% range. Now we're going to be in that 18 to 25% range. Or, if he's somebody that you really are desperately in a need of quarterback at this point, you may have to spend up a little bit more and go to that $25, $30 range for somebody that you would only spend 15 to 20 on.
Absolutely. The price is higher at this point. This is the benefit of saving up, because you're going to come across people that just purely don't have enough at this point, and that's where we want to be smart and disciplined with spending those loads. Because honestly, this is where I'll put 33 across 3 guys. If I have 100 that I saved all year, and I'm assuming not a lot of people can afford more than $20 on a bid, I'll just put 33 flat on the 3 dudes I want, and I'll feel confident that I'll probably get each of them.
All right, let's dive into the running back position.
Ooh, this one hurts. This one is not a name I'm necessarily eager to be singing his song, but Ezekiel Elliott. He had a bye this week, so his rostership just went down a little bit purely after that. But in the week prior, he had his most effective week as a runner or arguably his second most effective week. But against Indiana, he had 13 carries for 54 yards, and then he had 2 receptions on 34 yards as well. I like just seeing him get more volume. The snap percentage still isn't very high, mid-30s, so it's not like he's necessarily seeing the field a ton. But right now, the running back position is fairly bleak on the waivers. And by fairly bleak, I mean really bleak. It's not a good time right now. A lot of those Keaton Mitchell types, those are 70, 80% owned now. We have other guys that we're monitoring closely, kind of hoping for that opportunity, and some other guys we're going to allude to here shortly. But, someone like Zeke, if he's getting 13 carries, that's a lot more volume than most of the guys that you're going to see available at this point. So with that in mind, with Zeke only being 43% rostered, a guy that easily is worth, I'd say, 15% of fab at this point. I don't know if he's someone I'd be super aggressive, doing one of those 33% type things.
Right.
But he's someone that I would probably do about 15. What are your thoughts there?
I just, listen, I like Zeke. If he was back in Dallas, of course, that we wouldn't probably even be talking about him at this point. I think it is all situational being there in New England. Listen, we don't even know who the quarterback's going to be in New England at this point. It could be Malik Cunningham for all we know. It could be Will Grier for all we know at this point. It's all up in the air. I don't know if I would put too much on to Zeke unless I absolutely needed a running back, right? But I think that 15% of fab would probably be the absolute max that I'd be willing to go with a Zeke Elliott at this point, just mainly because, like I said, of the offense that he's in.
Yeah. I think at this point, when we talk about the running back position, there's maybe one option, and it's going to be the guy you're going to get into next. He's probably the only one I would say is worth more than that 15% of fab at this point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he's definitely worth more than 15% of the fab. I mean, 49% rostered in Sleeper, 56 on Yahoo, and a little bit more than that at 68 in ESPN. The prize of the week, it is going to be Zach Charbonnet. Since Kenneth Walker left the game with the oblique injury against the Rams, we don't know how long it could actually be a multi-week injury. I will caution you on the Zach Charbonnet add, and this is why, the next 3 games: San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco. It's not a great gauntlet to go through. It does get a little bit better after that with Philly and Tennessee, but that's a rough gauntlet to go through and put a lot of your chips into that one little bag there. The plus side is we saw this last week with Rashad White from Tampa up against that San Francisco defense. Charbonnet is a good receiver out of the backfield. So we can add that in there. Hauling in 6 receptions last week. If Walker is going to be out for any length of time, we should be able to expect Charbonnet to be able to withhold or withstand a heavy workload. Snap share has been going up even when Walker was in the lineup. His snap share was going up. He's averaging just under 5 yards per carry this season. Like I said, he's got the tough matchup coming up, but the volume alone with him being able to work in the receiving game, if Walker is going to be out, should make him a viable candidate for your team.
And I think something to emphasize too is this is a prospect a lot of people were really excited about coming out of the draft. It was just a matter of what team he went to, and that's where the stock went down a little bit. There are some people that still just believe that he could really have a significant role while Walker was healthy. We haven't seen that, but I still believe that he can show some promise right now. Obviously, these are some tough defenses he's facing, but I still think it can be relatively respectful in regards to what kind of production we can get from him, especially in the receiving game and in PPR leagues, especially.
Yeah, I think that's where he's going to hold his value for the next 3 weeks anyway, is going to be the receiving game, especially in a PPR league. So you have a pair of running backs that you would like to what's the correct word? I'm not going to say boost, or bolster up, but at least, give a little bit of love to these 2 guys.
There's 2 different ones here. One is going to be he's 20% rostered and the other is 19%. I'll start with Jaleel McLaughlin. He's the one I like probably more so in regards to Dynasty format for long-term upside, but he's not the one I like for right now in regards to redraft format. And that's with Jaleel McLaughlin right now. He had 5 targets, 5 receptions, only 14 yards. He had 1 carry for 1 yard this past week. He only played 15% of snaps, 6.5 fantasy points for PPR. Running back 42 on the year, according to Sleeper. He's had some fun weeks, but Javante's back. They've got another guy I'm going to mention here shortly. And then they've also got Jaleel. And, there's a lot of mouths to feed there. There's also a lot of receivers. It seems like they've been passing the ball a fair amount right now. I think we can all agree with that. And with that in mind, Jaleel McLaughlin is someone I think is worth rostering, but someone that, it doesn't deserve as much love as the next guy, Samaje Perine. 36% of snaps played last week, 13.7 points. Again, he only had 1 rushing attempt, 7 yards, nothing crazy there. But he had 7 targets, 7 receptions there for 60 yards. And for me, it's all about that passing volume. If he's getting that much workload in the receiving game, that's absolutely something I want to sign up for. The reason why I like him over Jaleel especially is with Perine, just that snap percentage. He essentially played twice as many snaps as Jaleel. So with that in mind, there's just more opportunity, and 7 targets is a lot. 7, and the fact that he hauled them all in too. Yeah, 60 yards isn't great, but 7 points just off of receptions is, that's awesome. You can't really ask for much more. 13.7, you're going to be happy with most weeks from the flex spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think both of these guys aren't necessarily something I'm spending a lot on. I'm not going to heavy investments in regards to fab, but someone like Samaje, especially with the 7 receptions this week, if I want to try and get a little discount running back, I don't have a lot of fab left, I might use like $10 on Samaje, right? It doesn't need to be a big investment, but that's where it's like I might not think I can compete to get some of the other guys we're alluding to. So that's where I think Samaje is more my bargain buy of the week for the running back position. Thoughts there?
No, I like the the as you would call it, the bargain bin, or the Goodwill shopping, or however you want to say it. But yeah, what he did, he's basically useless in the running game. Absolutely useless right now in the running game. I think over the last the last 3 games, I think he's had 3 opportunities to run the ball, but he's getting a ton of passing work. And I think that's where you're going to, let's see. Yeah, 3 opportunities over the last 3 games, to run.
And he's
And
had
he's
at least
gotten
3
13
targets.
he's
Yeah.
gotten 13 targets over that same time span.
He's had at least 2 targets every game this year,
Yep.
and only 2 games this year with less than 3.
Yeah. So,
And
I mean,
that's
that's what you're looking for if you're going after, the Samaje Perine. You're in that offense, because of the way they play, is always going to be in the game script, is always going to be looking to pass.
and I think something to emphasize too is this is a sneaky play for those bye week fillers. There's not as much high upside in regards to ceiling they could reach for like a 1 or 2 week taking advantage of injuries like Charbonnet. But with someone like Perine, say you have a week 13 bye from one of your top tier running backs. Oh, I need someone to slide in real quick. I can comfortably put Perine in there, and it might not be a lot of points, but I can feel comfortable that I'm for sure getting 7. If you don't have a great backup, that's someone I'd feel confident just getting me a couple points, at least contributing towards the team, right? Because sometimes that's all we can kind of hope for.
Yeah, and you just brought up something that is, we haven't talked about it to this point, but since you brought it up, I'll go ahead and elaborate on it. No, we don't have any bye weeks this week, but we have 6 next week. So
Isn't
we
that
get that
awful?
Armageddon again next week. So it's kind of crazy, but just getting ahead of the game. Get ahead of the game. Let's go ahead and get the guy that is, we're not going to play him this week, but we may play him next week, or likely to play him next week because of a buy situation that we have. So, yeah, I do love that. Make sure you guys are heading over to fantasyandframes.com. Check out all the rankings, all of our written articles that we have there as well. Some start sits, some for IDP, and of course offense. Drew did an amazing job doing the waiver wire article this week. I know we're talking about some of the players, but he does have some others in that article that we are not hitting on, that he did a phenomenal job throwing that together. So I wanted to give Drew at Drew3MR, I wanted to give him his props for doing that this week. I'll give you one guy that I was not high on going into the year. Maybe again because of the situation. I just didn't like him as sitting behind two players that I thought were decent. I have come to go, hey, the player that I thought was decent actually is not that good. Ty Chandler, though, 50% in ESPN, 56 in Yahoo, and only 52% in Sleeper is he rostered. And yes, Madison is the guy that I thought was going to be a decent running back. He is not as good as I thought he was. And that has become abundantly clear. Ty Chandler is absolutely the better of the 2 players. It's going to take O'Connell? It's going to take O'Connell to finally figure that out in order for Chandler to get the work that he should be getting. But he's averaging 7.3 yards per carry. That is insane. It is absolutely insane. Akers not being there. Chandler should see a decent number of touches. He's got a favorable matchup with the Bears, the Raiders, and the Bengals. Now, I will tell you this. I believe he could be a league winner if the Vikings figure it out that he should be the lead back, right? You look at last week just alone, he was only on the field 31% of the snaps. 80 or 73 yards. Now, yes, I know 31 of those yards were on the fake punt, and that's fine. But again, comparing 31% of the snap share to what Madison got at 65% of the snap share, and Madison had like 5-6 yards more than he did. with like double the amount of carries. Ty
Right.
Chandler should absolutely be somebody you're looking to add if he is available in your league.
Absolutely. I mean, that type of volume of production with only 31% snap share. Yeah, I would have liked to see the snap share higher there. I don't understand why it's so low. I don't understand why it went down from the week prior. That seemed to surprise me. I thought if anything it would go up, but yet he is still more productive, even with the lower snap percentage. Yeah, this is the time to buy. This is the guy that, yeah, he looks like the most talented back there. We talked about him a little bit last week. This will be your last opportunity to get him. He's 47% according to what I got on Sleeper right now. And yeah, next week I'm assuming that's going to be 60 plus easily.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to get him now. You're going to have to be aggressive on Fab. Don't be stingy, because this, like Gator alluded to, could be a league winning type of play.
Yeah, I mean he's trending in the up right now, 85,000. So and that's just on Sleeper, of course. So yeah, it's quite it's going to be quite an interesting ride to see what Chandler does if and when the Vikings figure out that Madison is not that guy.
Yeah, someone else that's not seeming to be that guy would be Christian Watson. At least right now, that is. And with that in mind, I wanted to talk about Romeo Doubs today. He's wide receiver 33 on the year. He's 61% rostered, so a little high. But I wanted to touch on him because if he is available, he's absolutely someone you should jump on right now. He's been fairly consistent in regards to targets. He's only had 3 weeks with less than 5 targets, and it's twice 3 targets and once 4. So he's getting the ball his way a lot. With that in mind, he's been fairly consistent in regards to production as well. Only 3 single-digit weeks. Otherwise, he's scored at least 11 fantasy points each and every week, only a high of 18.6. So he hasn't really gone too high in regards to his ceiling, but the opportunity is there. The ball keeps coming his way, and he scored a touchdown for the past 5 weeks. The ball keeps coming his way. The snap percentage looks great. Romeo Doubs, if he's available, he looks like a consistent guy that you could feel confident throwing in the flex. So absolutely, if he's there, I wanted to just throw some love his way, but there's another receiver in that offense as well that I wanted to discuss as well.
Yeah, it's rookie Jaden Reed. I mean, you're talking about a player who currently is 43% rostered on Sleeper. Last 2 weeks, touchdown in each game. Just this past week, yes, against the Chargers, 6 targets. We caught 4 of them, 46 yards. But here's the thing, Aaron Jones went down, and they started to scheme up plays to get Reed involved in the running game.
Yep,
Ended up with a
talked about it all
touchdown,
off season.
right? So maybe it's what are they? It's the thing that you and Drew talked about last week. It's that, and you and I have talked about this, not putting too much on the rookies to start with and kind of waiting for that bye week breakout kind of a thing. Well, we didn't get the bye week breakout per se. It's been 3 weeks since it's been 5 weeks since they had it, but 3 weeks after Green Bay's bye week is when you started to see Reed get more and more involved. The thing with Reed, though, is his snap share has been such a roller coaster. But I do believe that when Green Bay sees that he's on the field, there's good things that can happen, right? Every game that he's had 50% or more of the snap share, it's been a solid fantasy performance for him. It's been a solid fantasy performance for Jordan Love, and it's helped everybody else on that team as well. So like I said, I know he's going to bring value to the receiving game. But we're seeing them, throw him in that running game. There's going to be value for him as a rusher as well. Tough matchup this coming week, or next week against the Chiefs. But he's got a plus matchup in week 14 against the Vikings. I'm sorry, against the Giants, and then championship week against the Vikings. So Jordan Reed is definitely somebody that I've brought him up in the past. I think Zach's may have brought him up in the past, but we've definitely talked about him. Jorge's talked about him a ton from start sits to waiver wire articles as well. Jordan Reed is somebody that Fantasy and Frames has been on for a while. Stacey Perez, host of the Dynasty 365 show on Wednesdays, she has brought him up numerous times. And if you don't listen to me, go back and listen to all of them and let them tell you, because they've been talking about it for weeks. But Jordan Reed is definitely somebody that you should be eyeing and adding to your roster. In fact, let me just give you a quick. I just want to look this up. I just want to see where are we at here. I think this may be a little bit low, but I think 10%, maybe a little low. You may have to go 20 in order to guarantee adding him if he's available in your league. But if you could probably, depending on your league, depending on what the fab looks like, what the other players have, you could probably get away with 10 to 12%.
I think so. I think Jaden Reed. I think one thing that needs to be emphasized with Dobbs, with Reed, and even with Watson is this past week was the prime example that actually all three could eat and be feasible plays for fantasy at the same time. And that's the reason to love someone like Jaden Reed is because of that. The reason to not like someone like Christian Watson is because of that. Because I don't think the ceiling will necessarily be that high for any of them. But that's where when you can buy cheap, get someone like Reed on the waivers now, it's a great price for some consistent production. So I like Jaden Reed a lot there. With that in mind, I wanted to talk about another rookie wide receiver, someone that I've discussed a little bit before on the show. That's Demario Douglas for New England, playing at Philly, 45% rostered. Keeps going up. I've sang his song before. I've talked about that snap percentage. I've talked about the targets. He had a bye this past week, so his rostership went down a little bit. I love that in redraft when their stock is going up a little bit, and bye, I gotta go get someone else, and then the hype kind of just dies down for a little bit. Let me go snag him right now because they just forgot about him for a week. Yes, please. I've alluded to it before, but the past 4 weeks prior to this bye, at least 6 targets in all of them, 6, 7, 7, 9, and then receptions 4, 5, 5, and 6. It's been going up each week. Same with the yards, targets. Snap percentage has been 62% or higher each of those 4 weeks. Coming off of that injury week where he didn't play at all against Vegas, since then he's just been a model of consistency, and I expect the rest of the year. Well, I don't necessarily trust anything in this offense. He looks like the most talented piece of that offense at this point. So 44% rostered easily. I would say I'd pay about 20% to secure him. Just similar to Jaden Reed in that regard, but both seem consistent. Both young upside guys that seem like they have a role in their offense.
Yeah, and I like Demario Douglas just as much as I like Jaden Reed. I think the difference between the two is just the offense that they're in. Yeah. That's just about the only difference between the two. I think Demario Douglas, if you could take Demario Douglas, put him on the Packers, put Jaden Reed on the Patriots, and they'd be pretty much doing the exact same thing anyway. So I don't hate it. I think if I were to put them in the priority, it would be Jaden Reed again, like I said, just because of the offense. But Demario Douglas would be right behind him.
Yeah. I'm noticing a trend though this week with the receivers. Outside of Dobbs, we've just got a whole bunch of little guys we're singing song. They're singing their song. I think. Don't you have one more for us though?
I do, but you want to talk about the little guy? It's Tutu Atwell, right? Little 5'9", 5'10", something like that.
5'9", yeah.
Yeah, it's Tutu Atwell. We will get more information on Cooper Kupp, hopefully coming out very, very shortly over this next couple days. If Cooper Kupp is going to be out for any length of time, what we saw the first 3 weeks when Kupp was originally injured back then, could we see that again with Tutu Atwell? I think we can. I think there is a world where Tutu Atwell turns back into that, I'm not going to say he's going to be getting, 9 targets a game, but if he could get 6, 7 targets a game. Here's the thing, though, that's probably the most important about everything with Tutu Atwell is you had Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua to start with. Then it went Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, right? Well, guess who didn't lose any snap shares? He was still 85%, 90% snap share. The whole season was Tutu Atwell. He just didn't get the targets for those few games. he gets those targets coming back to him, last or 2 weeks ago before they went into the bye against Green Bay. Didn't do a lot with them. It wasn't the same as it was the first 3 weeks. But if there's an extended absence, we could be back to that week 1 to week 3 fantasy production.
I think something to emphasize, though, as well, is during some of that down period was also when Stafford was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of Kupp and Puka both being healthy, Stafford was also gone. Tutu was still out there. He was still seeing the field, still getting routes. Just a matter of the ball wasn't coming his way. It's partially probably game script with all those other guys out there, just lack of opportunity, but also different arm. So maybe the volume wasn't there the same either. They clearly weren't throwing the ball as much when they didn't have Stafford. I mean, rightfully so. But no, Tutu at this point, he should be more than 24% rostered, especially with the upside, because we don't know what the status of Kupp is, and these kind of things that when they linger, they might want to be safe rather than sorry, especially if they feel like they have a chance at maybe that 7 seed. If they feel like they need him later in the year, they're going to preserve him right now, right? So that's where someone like Tutu I could see having a really strong next couple of weeks, and for that kind of cheap price, I think would you agree 10%?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Here's the thing: is can you see Tutu? And again, this is all assuming that Cooper Kupp's going to miss a week or two.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you see Tutu getting back to that mid to back end wide receiver 3 range? Somebody that you could absolutely plug into your flex position
for the next 1 or 2 weeks if Kupp's out. Yeah. I would say. My only concern is Kyren Williams is back as well, and that's one thing that Kyren looked great when he was healthy.
Kyren was there for the first week.
Yeah, and
that's where 8 of 6 or 6 of 8,
and Tutu's on the field either way. So that's where, no, I like Tutu. I could see, wide receiver 3. Yeah, I like that. Next week or two, Kupp out, absolutely. He's been enough of a piece of this offense. For me, we've discussed it before. Snap percentage definitely deserves more love than it gets, just because getting on the field is half the battle.
Yep.
Getting the opportunities. You can only get the opportunities if you're out there. The more that you're out there, the more they'll naturally some things will just be scripted in where, oh, cool, it's my chance now. Yep. And with that in mind, I think Tutu, next week or two, I feel really good about that. Someone else I wanted to discuss as well at the wide receiver position is another young gun, Khalil Shakir out in Buffalo. He had his best week of his career. He's a second-year guy out of Boise State. He had 20.5 fantasy points, mainly off of a touchdown, a really big play, but he had 3 receptions on 4 targets, 115 yards. There's a lot of boom bust here, but it's something that could be really fun, especially at 20% rostered on sleeper leagues, where this is a guy that I wouldn't spend more than 10% on, but I feel confident I could probably get him at 10%. In these past couple of weeks, the opportunity's been there more and more. The snap percentage keeps going up week over week. These past 4 weeks, he's played 65, 71, 76, and 74% snaps. He never saw more than 50% prior to that in his career. So he's working his way into this offense more. He's getting more of a role, getting more opportunity. And with that in mind, this is the type of high-octane offense where I'd like to think there's someone else on that field that could realistically create for me in regards to fantasy production. Yes, they have Kincaid. Yes, they have Diggs. But yes, they have Gabe Davis, but Gabe Davis is hit or miss. So that I look at Shakir as like, when the weeks that Gabe Davis doesn't hit, why can't that be Shakir that's hitting? With that in mind, what are your thoughts there, Jay?
Yeah, I was going to bring up Gabe Davis on this because, you sit here and you say Shakir is boomer bust. Well, yeah, he's boomer bust, second-year guy. But when you look at his snap share, first, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, first 7 weeks, it was just that, nothing crazy. But since week 8, when they played Tampa, Cincinnati, Denver, and then, of course, the Jets. It went from there to 70% is where he's averaging over the last 4 weeks. That's an insane number for somebody that didn't play any more than like 35%. It went straight up to 70, 75%. And then you look at what Gabe Davis has done. He's been at that 90% range and gave you 2 big fat donuts over the last 3 weeks. Those same 3 weeks, Gabe Davis has given you a total of 9.6. And then you look at what Shakir has given you, and he's given you roughly 33 and a half, somewhere in that range for that. So same 3 games. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to take over Gabe Davis, but I didn't like Gabe Davis to start with. I thought Gabe Davis was the epitome of boomer bust. That's the reason I brought him up. Is you brought Shakir up as a boomer bust. I think I like Shakir. There's so many mouths to feed in that offense. So many mouths to feed. And it truly is, who is it going to be this week? Is it going to be Kincaid? Is it going to be Gabe Davis? Is it going to be Shakir? Is it only going to be, Diggs? That's the biggest question. I mean, I love the ad. Again, I think we're talking somewhere in that 10% range.
Yeah. This is more my deeper leagues, those 12-team, 14-team leagues where we're getting into the weeds more. Someone like Khalil is definitely where I'm going at that point.
Yep. Let me give you this quick PSA real quick, give you the rundown of the Fantasy in Frames podcast and how they work throughout the week. Of course, you have us right here on Tuesday night with the Waiver Wire show. Tomorrow night normally is Dynasty 365 for your Dynasty content at 8. Fourth in Frames, which will happen tomorrow, is your week-to-week redraft content. That's at 9 o'clock on Wednesdays. Shoot the Gap tomorrow. Your IDP content, that's every Wednesday at 10. And then, of course, the big show that brings it all together comes Sunday morning, the Fantasy in Frames pregame show from 9 a.m. to 12, answering all of your start sits, trades, waivers. We answer everything on that Sunday morning show, and you never know who is going to pop up. Last week, we had Colby Conway. Who knows who's popping up this week? But let's dive back into the waivers, get the last position in for us tonight, and that's going to be the tight end position. Zach, there was an injury that happened 2 weeks ago now, I guess it was. If you hadn't heard about, I'm sure Zach will bring his name up, but there was a big injury in the tight end position, and you're saying this guy is going to get some opportunity.
This is a guy similar to Khalil Shakir, where they're a second-year player. Whatever hype they had kind of died down after year 1 lack of production, just purely due to lack of opportunity because there were stars in front of them. Diggs with Shakir, Andrews with Likely for the Baltimore tight end room. Isaiah Likely, Coastal Carolina tight end, second-year guy. This was a highly touted prospect coming out of the draft in 2022. This was a guy that many people were super high on, super excited about, but then quickly forgotten about because, well, he was behind Mark Andrews, and we knew what Mark Andrews was at the tight end position. With that in mind, Isaiah Likely, he hasn't necessarily had a lot of opportunities this year. He was that backup tight end, getting 10, 20% snap percentage. But we did see some fun weeks last year. I wanted to touch on specifically week 8 and 9 last year, where I believe Andrews was at, but he had 22.7 fantasy points on 7 targets, 6 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. And then in week 18, 13 targets, 8 receptions, 103 yards. This is a guy where in limited opportunity, where he's seen more volume, he's really been super productive. This is a guy that right now is 8% rostered. Easily is going to skyrocket this week with Andrews news going out that he's clearly rest of the year, right, Jay? Andrews done? Yep. All right. So rest of the year, Andrews is done. And with that in mind, Isaiah Likely is smash play. This is a guy I'm going to be super aggressive on. This is the guy I want most in regards to waivers this week. This is a guy I'm super excited about. Again, we've talked about McBride. We've guided you to the right way with McBride, with Ferguson, and with Meyer, Kincaid. Right. It's time for another one of these young stud tight ends to show why they're such a high-end prospect at one point in time a year ago. That in mind, what are your thoughts on Isaiah Likely, Jay?
Well, real quick, I'm looking it up right now. He did not speculate on whether he could return. So they're not going to put him on IR. They're not putting Mark Andrews on IR. He could return for the playoffs, but that is for the NFL playoffs, not for the fantasy playoffs. So just a quick deal there. I don't mind the Isaiah Likely ad. I think you can probably get him for next to nothing. Look, we saw the first 3 weeks of the season. He got, or at least the first 3 weeks of the season, he at least got some targets, right? And then it was 4 weeks where he didn't even touch the field. It seems like 30% snap share, but he was no targets. He was there basically for blocking. This could be the chance for Isaiah Likely to actually produce on the field, knowing that it's going to be a few weeks at minimum that Mark Andrews, and he's not going to have to look over his shoulder, right? Just be able to go and hopefully play loose. I love this as an ad if you have the bench spot, if you have the roster spot. I wouldn't go out there and add him if it's going to cost you a player that is more than likely going to be in your starting lineup. Does that make sense? If you have a player that is going to be on a bye this week or next week rather, but he's immediately going to go back into your lineup, don't drop that player, I guess. That's how I'm trying to say that. I do like Likely as an ad, especially for you can get him next to nothing probably.
If I am one of those teams that didn't get the Ferguson, the McBride, the Kincaid, some of those other young tight ends we've just shown a lot of praise towards. If I wasn't lucky enough to get one of those guys, then I'm going to be more eager to get Likely. But if I have one of those guys, I don't need him. Yeah, unless it's a tight end premium. Otherwise, right. I'm not too intrigued. But if I missed out on all those other tight ends, or if I'm the guy that had Mark Andrews and I wasn't taking anyone else because I didn't need them because I had Mark, this is where I'm pursuing Likely. I think he's my priority at the tight end position, if that's still a position of need. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, the tight end that should be the priority, at least in my opinion, and I've talked about this tight end multiple occasions, and I know you have as well. But hell, let's do it again since nobody wanted to listen the first 6 or 7 times we talked about him. Rostered in 26% of sleeper, which is an absolute travesty. But it's Cade Otton. The usage is there. He ran the most routes out of anybody, including Mike Evans, including Chris Godwin, including Rashad White, of everybody last week. And it gets easier. It gets even easier for him with the Colts and the Falcons. His lowest snap share on the year, 91%. And that was back in week 3. Since week 3, his lowest snap share is 95%. Why do I bring that up? The same reason Zach brought it up earlier. It's all about an opportunity. You can't do anything if you're picking splinters out of your hind end. On the field, you have the opportunity. What does he do with that opportunity? Well, funny you should ask. 34 receptions on 46 targets, 3 touchdowns, averaging 6.5 yards per target. Not too shabby for a second-year tight end with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. I mean, the offense has Evans, Godwin, Rashad White, and Otton still seeing 13% of the target share. Again, not bad for a second-year tight end.
I mean, at this point, there's no need to question if he has a role in this offense or what they see in him. They clearly see a special talent and someone that they want to give a workload to. You don't play that much. There's enough good blocking tight ends where you don't play that much by mistake. Obviously there hasn't been this super high scoring week. Obviously, you had the 26 against Houston in week 9, but in general, it's not like he's hit 30 plus and super crazy stat line. But that's just not really the tight end position. That's just a little bit too high of expectations for the tight end position as a whole in fantasy. I think someone like Cade Otton is a great ad. Tight end 18, 26% rostered. This dude needs to be a lot closer to 50% rostered at this point. There's there's no excuse for why he's so low. And if you're tight end needy and you don't want to play the risk of likely, Otten is the
Yeah.
most sure thing you'll be able to find.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like every week when I turn the TV on to the Bucks game, somebody is saying his name. Whether it's catching a pass or making a great block or whatever the case is. I mean, again, that's why we have tight end premium leagues, because they have to equal. We have to boost them up just a little bit because they do have a bigger job, and that is blocking. But when this guy is on the field 90+% of the time, and he gets the opportunities, like I said, I think his lowest targets this over the last 3 weeks was 3, and he's gotten 7 multiple times this year. He's capitalized on just about everything that he can capitalize on. But I do know you had one more earlier that you and I were talking before the show that you wanted to at least touch on.
It's not something that's super exciting or sexy, but it's something that I think is needed to be said in regards to especially your deeper redraft leagues, those 12 plus, where a lot of these more common names that are discussed in these waiver wire ads just simply aren't available because they were already rostered. That's where I want to steer you to a Tucker Kraft. Rookie tight end from Green Bay, 2% rostered. The reason why I want to mention him is he doesn't necessarily see the field a lot outside of blocking for Green Bay, but right now it's looking like rookie tight end Luke Musgrave for the Packers has a fairly significant abdominal injury, and with that in mind, he may be out at least for the foreseeable future. TBD on all the on the Musgrave stuff, but if Musgrave is out, it's a quick turnaround. It's a Thursday game against the Lions. Kraft is someone that's going to see plenty of opportunity. Just with that late game injury with Musgrave, Kraft had 2 targets, 2 receptions, 32 yards. Nothing crazy, but at the same time, if we're in need of an immediate tight end filler, someone like Tucker Kraft, I could see some more upside. Probably 4 to 6 targets. Feel good about that, but nothing too crazy high, but someone that's going to be a super cheap ad, and there could definitely be more of an opportunity where you could genuinely pay nothing to add them.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap it for us. Once again, happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Hopefully, your Thanksgiving day turns out to be wonderful. The food, the family, the friends, and the football. Don't forget, make sure you're following Fantasy in Frames on Twitter, TikTok, and of course, right here on YouTube. All of them at Fantasy in Frames. Make sure you're following Zach behind the Zach. Myself at FantasyJ77. Until next week, we'll see you then.